As a beginning homesteader and a neophyte gardener, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have a few books that have helped guide me through my first year of gardening and are helping me prepare for our first year of owning livestock next year. Hi everybody, welcome back to Bustling Home. So if you are a beginning homesteader or considering homesteading, let me show you a few books that I recommend that are very approachable and give you exactly the information you need. And then at the end, one book that I can't say I recommend even though it has good reviews. So let's get started. The first book I would recommend is this Stories Basic Country Skills. It says, A Practical Guide to Self-Reliance. And while we're not trying to be completely self-reliant here, homesteading is sort of heading towards self-reliance because we're trying to produce our own food and produce some of our own products. So, in this book, there are 4 sections. Your place in the country, your garden, yard, and orchard, country cooking and stocking up, and your barn, stable, and fields. So, your place in the country goes through the types of things that you need to have an independent homestead in the country that doesn't rely on city services and doesn't rely on some modern conveniences. The second section, your garden, yard, and orchard, goes through vegetable garden, herb garden, flowers, water and rock gardens, improving the soil, berries and fruits, arbors and trellises, greenhouses, sheds, all the stuff that you need for putting together your garden, or multiple gardens even. And it talks about some of the pests and pollinators that you'll need, and gives you a good general overview of the plant side of things. Part 3, Country Cooking and Stocking Up, shows you how to deal with the bounty that comes out of your garden. Because if you put in a garden, get a whole bunch to harvest from it, you can't eat it all at once. You've got to have some way to preserve it, whether it's canning, dehydrating, freezing, whatever. You need something. And this goes through how to preserve it and how you can cook it. Gives you some recipes for that. Part 4 is where you learn about livestock. Not only taking care of the livestock, but also the infrastructure needed, like a barn, which is for livestock and for storing equipment, or a chicken coop, or a lean-to for larger livestock. And it talks about small-scale farming, which is most likely at least what you're going to start out as, is small-scale farmer. Because as a homesteader, you don't need 10 heads of cattle, because each cow will produce something like 5 gallons of milk a day. Now, if you have a really big family, maybe that is just perfect for you, but that's a lot of milk. You better figure out something to do with it besides drink it. Now, the really neat thing about this guide is it helps you with basic things that you can use in town too, like troubleshooting your toilet. The toilet that runs constantly, the toilet that won't flush, replacing certain parts of the toilet when they break or just stop working. I mean, this is really useful stuff. This is stuff that I should have learned from my dad before he died and I didn't. So I can look in this book, read about it, then maybe go find a video if I think I really need to see it. But this really gets me started on what I need to do and what I need to look for as far as supplies and maybe more information. This book is the one I start with when I'm just looking for a breadth of information. It might not go very deep into a lot of these topics, but it gives me a start so that I can at least decide if that's the problem that I'm looking at or if that's the thing that I need to research more. So this is a great general guide. Next up are, not surprisingly probably, more story guides. Story seems to put out a lot of good books. So far I have Story's Guide to Raising Chickens, since we are planning on getting chickens next year. And I've been looking through this to figure out what breeds I want and some ideas for designing a chicken coop. I've been reading up on how to keep the chickens safe during winter because that can be a problem in Wisconsin. Sometimes the winter can be mild, but sometimes the temperature can drop to 20 below with wind chills around 40 to 50 below like we've had for maybe a week the last couple of winters. That is just bitterly cold for anything, and I don't want to lose a bunch of livestock because it got really cold out. Not only is that cruel to the animals, but livestock are a big investment. This book I have found very useful as a more specific guide for chickens. Along the same lines, I have Story's Guide to Raising Poultry, which sounds like it's kind of redundant to the chickens book. And this does have a lot about chickens in it, but it also has stuff about turkeys, ducks, geese, guineas, and game birds. Because we are considering not only getting chickens for our flock, but also maybe some ducks and maybe some guineas to help with pest control in the garden. Now, the chicken book provides a lot of detail about chickens. This one provides somewhat less detail about each of the birds, but it's enough to get us started. And if we have any specific questions, then we can look it up online or ask in a forum somewhere on a Facebook group. But this will help us get set up to have poultry on our farm. Then I have a third story guide to raising sheep. Yeah, I really like these story guides. They're very well laid out, they're very well printed, and they have great information in them. This one talks about breeding, care, and facilities. So what I've been focusing on so far is looking at the breeds of sheep that we might want to have that fit our climate. Because again, Wisconsin can get really cold in the winter. But it can also get really hot in the summer, like somewhere in the 90s, or sometimes even it goes over 100. And it's humid. Maybe not as humid as somewhere like New Orleans or Florida, but it can get pretty darn humid here. So we have some kind of extreme weather being in the inland area of the United States. And we're nowhere near Lake Michigan, so we don't get the moderating influence of the Great Lakes either. But this goes over several paragraph blurb for each of these breeds of sheep. And of course, eye candy. I love the pictures. I just love looking at the pictures. It's fun to just page through these guides too, because they have some really good pictures in them. Like this one for the Icelandic sheep. I just think that's a cool picture. So goes through the breeds, and then talks about how to construct fencing, and gives you a little bit of detail on how that fencing needs to go in. So this is really useful for someone who has had basically no exposure to farming, livestock, or even gardening, which, I mean, sheep aren't too relevant for gardens. But it's good for a beginner, and it's probably at least good for someone who has a little bit of knowledge, maybe an intermediate sheep owner or something. It probably is a little bit basic for somebody who has more advanced knowledge, like somebody who grew up on a farm. But if you are moving from city life and professional life to homesteading life, kind of like I did, for whatever reason, I highly recommend these story guides that are specific to whatever livestock you're looking at. And we are looking at possibly adding rabbits to our livestock, and I don't have that book. I checked it out from the library for a little bit, but that's still a point of contention between me and Jeff on whether or not we're going to try rabbits. So I haven't invested in that book yet. Now, since you've stuck around through all the books I like, here's one. I think it's the first one I even bought that it has really good reviews on Amazon, and a lot of people seem to love it. I just can't use it. I don't find it useful. I find that the information is poorly organized and very wordy, and it's not even as pretty as the story guides. I mean, the story guides have really nice pictures in them, so maybe I'm a sucker. This is a little bit better than newsprint, but it's all black and white. It's a lot of words, which, I mean, yeah, I can read a lot of words, that's fine, but I want something that is a quick guide. I don't need ideas of where to buy things. I'll figure that out locally. I don't need to have spreads like this, where there is this one little picture in the upper corner, and I have to skim through this to figure out what I'm looking for on that page. Or this talks about predators, and then barns and fences. It's just so text heavy. And there are so few pictures about even how to build a barn. I mean, that is a great time to have pictures. Like this picture here, that's like a hand-drawn picture. They could have at least had something that was drawn on a computer so that it looked like a professional drawing, or a picture of a real fence to show what it looks like. Maybe I'm not the target audience for it, but I just don't find this to be a usable guide. And I might just get rid of it. I don't often get rid of books. It's kind of like reading a book. When you start reading a book, I almost always finish reading the book. I mean, I used to when I would read and actually had time to finish a book. But I would almost always finish the book, even if I didn't like it, just to finish it. It was very rare that I would stop partway through the book and just set it aside because I couldn't handle reading it. This is one of these books that I think I'm going to have to set aside. So that's what I have for you today on my collection of beginning homesteader books. If you have any favorite homesteading books, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to find some new resources. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up below. If you'd like to see more videos about homesteading, homeschooling, and homemaking, please subscribe to Bustling Home. I'd love to have you join our community. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you next time.